Welcome to Reform Thinking.
Glad to be here.
In this deep dive, we're opening up Psalm 17. It's known as the prayer of the righteous sufferer, and it is an incredibly dramatic and personal appeal.
It really is. Our focus today is on David's plea for God to clear his name, and then this stunning contrast he draws between the wicked and the righteous.
The portion of the wicked versus his own satisfaction.
Right. And how the whole psalm points forward to Jesus Christ. So our mission, if you will, is to get at the real meaning of this prayer by looking at, the courtroom of God, the nature of his covenant love, and the big question it asks every single one of us.
And that question is,
what truly is your ultimate portion? What are you satisfied by?
Okay, so let's set the stage a bit. Psalm 17 doesn't exist in a vacuum. It sits in a really telling sequence in the Psalter. Just before it, in Psalm 16, David confesses that God himself is his chosen portion, his inheritance. Then right after, in Psalm 18, you get this glorious celebration of God's deliverance.
And that sequence is just so key to the mood here. Psalm 17 is the bridge.
The in-between.
The in-between. It's this raw, honest prayer from a man who is actively going through it. I mean, suffering, slander, real opposition.
While he's waiting.
While he's waiting for the deliverance he knows God is going to send. It's not the prayer you pray after the victory. It's the prayer from the trenches.
So it's spoken between that confession of God as his portion and the celebration of God's action.
Yes. He's praying to the God who is his portion, but he's asking him to act now, to act openly, while the enemies are still closing in.
The atmosphere then, right from the start, feels very high stakes.
Yeah.
This isn't just a vague cry for help. It feels almost legally precise.
It is. And before we get into the details of his appeal, the core tension, the thing that I think hooks you, is right there in verse 15.
The climax of the psalm.
The whole thing builds to this. It draws this sharp line between two completely different ways of defining a good life.
Okay.
David just refuses to envy the successful, temporary rewards of the men of the world. His joy is rooted in a hope that goes beyond death itself, this promise that he will awaken and see God's face.
So the core question is always there.
Always. What are you truly satisfied with? Is it something temporary, something that ends when you die? Or is it in something eternal that starts with seeing the living God? That distinction drives the whole prayer.
That sets the scene very well. So let's get into section 1, this idea of the courtroom. Verse 1 is where the legal structure really starts. David comes not as someone just wanting comfort, but as a petitioner in a high court.
It's a carefully framed legal appeal. He asks God to hear a just cause. He wants a verdict.
And what makes this opening feel so different from other pleas for help we see in the Psalms?
The focus is on justice, not just on mercy. He's appealing to the judge's own standards. He says, attend to my cry because the cause is just.
He's claiming he's in the right here. That he's suffering for doing good, not for some sin or foolishness on his part.
Exactly. And the specific thing he asks for right away narrows the focus. He wants his vindication, his formal declaration of righteousness, to come directly from your presence.
That location is everything.
It is.
He's not looking for his friends to agree with him. He's not running a PR campaign to clear his name. He wants the declaration from the only judge whose opinion is final.
Right. And all sources point out 3, let's say, flawed places people look for justification today, all of which David just bypasses.
Okay, what are they?
First, you've got earthly courts. They can be biased or corruptible or just way too slow.
Sure.
Second, there's public opinion. Getting enough likes on social media, that changes with the wind.
It's superficial.
And third, and this one is maybe the most sneaky, is the internal courtroom of self-justification.
Where you just convince yourself you were right.
Yes, you spend all this energy arguing the case in your own head, often by just shutting down your own conscience. David ignores all 3.
Because none of them are final. None of them bring real peace. So why is David so insistent that the only courtroom that matters is before God's face?
Because the only eyes that see the final objective truth are the eyes of the Lord. Human judgments are incomplete. Our own self-justification is, it's tainted by self-love.
Of course.
When David brings his case to God's presence, he is handing over his entire reputation, his cause, his future, to the one who judges justly and sees everything. The verdict is based only on what God sees and says, not on what people think.
The sources gave a great analogy for this. They compared it to the instant replay booth in a pro sports game.
It's a perfect modern picture. On the field, you have chaos. The crowd is arguing, the players are yelling at the ref, the commentators are debating.
Everyone has an opinion.
Everyone. But the final judgment, the only call that actually changes the score, comes from the official in the booth with the perfect angle.
And that call is final.
It's final. And the believer, who's waiting for that call, is freed. Freed from needing to take revenge or desperately defend their name or play politics. David won't argue with the crowd. He's just waiting for the call from the booth.
And that trust in the process sets up this really audacious claim he makes in verses 3 through 5.
It is audacious.
He appeals to God's own examination of his heart, saying God has already tested him and found him clean. Tell us about this claim of covenantal integrity.
This is a really key moment in the psalm, and you have to read it carefully. He says God has visited him by night, tested his heart, and found no deceit or malice in this specific conflict.
That's the key part.
Yes, the commentators are very careful here. This is not a claim to being completely sinless. David, who wrote Psalm 51, knows he's a sinner who needs grace.
That's the clarification we need. If he knows he's a sinner, why does he sound like he's bragging about his integrity?
He's claiming what we call covenantal integrity in the face of the specific things his enemies are accusing him of.
Okay.
They're accusing him of some deep, specific evil, maybe plotting a violent coup or acting with cruelty. And David is saying, "Search me, God. In this specific trial regarding how I've treated these accusers, my heart isn't filled with the evil they say it is."
I haven't been plotting revenge or trying to destroy them with lies.
Precisely. He's saying, I haven't acted toward them with the same malice they've shown me. He's claiming that he has remained faithful in this specific situation. His actions and his motives toward his persecutors have been shaped by the standards of the covenant.
He says his steps were protected and he avoided the ways of the violent.
Right, and that's evidence of a real moral choice that's been tested by God himself. That phrase, visited him by night, is critical.
Why so?
He's appealing to the fact that God has already probed his inner life in the dark, when the masks are off and there are no human witnesses. He's saying, I'm clear of what they accuse me of because you, God, know my real motives.
So that brings up a practical question. How did David maintain this purity, this restraint? I mean, if he's being hunted by violent people, the natural response is to fight back with the same tools.
The sources are clear. This integrity comes from submitting to an outside standard. David says he used the word of God's lips to guide his steps, not his own gut feelings or his desire for revenge.
Not his own tactical calculations.
Right. The works of man, he talks about, are the usual patterns of a fallen world. Slander, deception, violence. David says he turned away from those things because he was governed by God's revealed will, which commands justice, not personal vengeance.
That is a huge point for anyone facing conflict today. It means you don't have to defend your name using the world's aggressive tactics. Submitting to God's word is what protects your integrity in the middle of the fight.
It's the great restraint of the righteous. David gets that the final verdict belongs to God, who holds the right to act in justice. David's job is to be faithful and submit, and to hand his case and his reputation over to the judge. And this refusal to grab justice for himself sets the stage for the next section.
Right. After the legal appeal, he shifts to a relational plea in verse 6. And he shows this incredible confidence. He says, I call upon you, for you will answer me, not I hope you might answer.
That confidence, that assurance, it's rooted in God's character and his past actions. And that leads him right into the key relational idea in verse 7.
Which is?
He appeals to God's est. This is a central Hebrew term that defines God's relationship with his people. We often translate it as steadfast love, but, that really doesn't do it justice.
So for someone hearing this term for the first time, how do we get at the depth of it? It's more than just love.
Much more. Est is loyal love, or maybe better, covenant faithfulness. It's not just a feeling, it's action that is driven by an obligation.
An obligation.
Yes, think of it less like a warm emotion and more like the powerful bond where God ties himself to his people by promise and by oath. It's a love that has to act to preserve the relationship and keep the covenant promises.
So when David asks God to wondrously show his est, he's asking for something that's grounded in God's own commitment, but is also an astonishing act of mercy.
That's it. He's appealing for a mercy that goes way beyond a cold contract of rules and penalties. If God were only governed by strict justice, David would be toast. But because God has bound himself to David in this loyal love, this ḥesed, David can ask God to act based on his own promises. He's basically saying, I'm your covenant partner, so your own honor requires you to deliver me.
So he moves from standing formally before the judge to appealing to the loyalty of a father. And he knows that relationship secures his request.
Yes, and you can see that intimacy in the images he uses next. Let's look at that famous metaphor in verse 8. Keep me as the apple of your eye.
It's one of the most striking images in the whole Old Testament.
It is, and it illustrates ease perfectly. The apple of the eye is the pupil, the black center. It's incredibly precious because our sight depends on it, and it's exquisitely sensitive.
So David is praying for what you call instinctive protection.
Instinctive protection. That's a great way to put it. Think about it. You don't have to tell your eyelids to close when dust flies at your face. The reflex is instant. It's unthinking. It's designed to protect the most vital sensory organ you have.
So he's asking God to treat his safety as a matter of deepest personal concern.
Yes, with that immediate, unhesitating reflex of a parent catching a falling child. He's asking God to treat him as vital to his own operation. He's actually referencing Deuteronomy 32, where Israel is described this way.
Okay, but I have to ask the question that comes up here.
Yeah.
If David is asking for instinctive protection, how do we square that with the very real suffering he's obviously going through? It sounds like a contradiction.
That's a critical question for any believer who is suffering. The sources are careful to clarify that this plea for protection is not a guarantee of an easy life right now. David isn't saying, stop every single bad thing from happening to me this instant. He's asking for ultimate, sovereign, covering protection spiritually and eternally.
So he knows he might get hurt physically.
He might, but he's asking that God's east ensures his final safety and his final vindication. The dust might hit your face, but it won't destroy the eye. The suffering is temporary. God's protection is the final word.
And that idea of total safety is backed up by the second metaphor in that same verse, hiding in the shadow of your wings.
Yes, the shadow of your wings reinforces that idea of complete covering safety. It's the image of a great bird, maybe even the wings of the cherubim, which were symbols of God's own protective presence sheltering its young.
Danger can be all around.
The lion can be lurking, but the chick is hidden in a place of safety and warmth it could never create for itself. It's a complete refuge provided by God.
And he sets this refuge right up against the deadly enemies who surround me. He's contrasting the circle of God's care with the circle of his enemies' hostility.
That's the relational pivot. He knows their hostility is lethal. They're circling him like predators. But he places the reality of God's this loyal, protective covenant love over against their malice.
God's love is stronger.
Infinitely stronger. David's prayer is like a child asking his father, who also happens to be the supreme judge, for a verdict, and then immediately climbing into his lap for safety. He's saying, I know you're the just judge, and because you are also my father in covenant, your judgment will be my protection.
So after establishing his own integrity and God's protective love, David turns his focus to his accusers. He draws this sharp moral and theological line.
He does. In verses 10 through 12, he details the character of the wicked. And he starts with their inner condition.
What defines them?
Two things, really. Inner hardness and outward arrogance. David says they close their hearts to pity.
That's not just an accident.
No. It suggests an inner life that is sealed shut against mercy or empathy. They've trained themselves to feel nothing for the suffering of others.
And that inner hardness then expresses itself outwardly.
Absolutely. Their speech is proud and boastful. They have no fear of God. They think they're a law unto themselves, and this fuels their actions. David uses this chilling, predatory imagery.
Little line.
They're like a lion eager to tear, and they're lurking in ambush.
Yeah.
This is a picture of calculated, focused evil. Their hostility isn't just minor criticism. They are actively tracking David's steps, waiting for the one moment of opportunity to take him down.
This is a fight for survival. But the theological pivot, the really devastating analysis, comes in verse 14. He dissects their reward.
They are men of the world whose portion is in this life.
That phrase is a huge theological concept in the Psalms.
It is. It's a definitive critique. He's defining them by their worldview, which is purely temporal. Their entire horizon is bounded by this age.
They live as if there's no eternity.
No resurrection, no God to stand before. Their earthly success, wealth, full bellies, kids who survive them, a visible legacy, that is their treasure. That is their functional God.
They're totally invested in this world.
And totally blind to the giver of all those things.
But this is where we have to clarify something. David says that God is the one providing this prosperity. He says, you fill their womb with what you treasure. Why would God give them these gifts, wealth, children, if they're wicked?
And that's the tragedy. This is a subtle but very deep theological judgment, right in line with Reformed thought. God, in his providence, gives them this abundance, but because they are satisfied with the gifts and not the giver, the prosperity itself becomes a judgment.
It blinds them.
It successfully blinds them to spiritual reality. It makes them content with what's temporary. They never look up because their bellies are too full right here on earth. Their portion doesn't, cannot, and will not extend beyond the grave.
That's a staggering point. It really dismantles the assumption that health and wealth are always signs of God's favor.
It does. David argues the opposite can be true. The wicked trade eternal joy for temporary comfort.
So this is a radical critique of materialism, of any view that says this life is all there is.
Or even a religious view that says wealth is the main sign of God's blessing. David forces you to ask, do you really want a portion that is only in this life? One that just dissolves when you die?
The sources gave an analogy for this, comparing the wicked's portion to winning a massive jackpot in a currency that's about to become worthless.
That analogy captures the short-sighted tragedy perfectly. They feel incredibly rich right now. They're spending freely, building huge houses, enjoying all the envy. The wealth is real, it's visible.
But they're ignoring a warning.
They're completely unaware or just ignoring that the currency they hold, money, status, power, it's not legal tender in the eternal kingdom they're speeding toward.
So their fortune becomes worthless.
Instantly. The second they cross the border of death. Their wealth is real now, but it's a phantom wealth. It provides zero satisfaction when they awaken into eternity.
And that stark comparison sets up the sharpest pivot in the whole psalm. After describing the darkness of the wicked's portion, David turns in verse 15 with this singular phrase, "As for me."
It's a conscious, deliberate rejection of the world's outlook. He is placing his hope on a reality the wicked cannot see and do not seek.
And this verse is really the theological high point. It answers that big question. What is the believer's true portion?
And the answer is just terrifyingly good. It's God himself, personally known, seen, and enjoyed forever. And David defines this satisfaction in 3 interlocking ways.
Okay, let's start with the first one, a relational vision. He says, I shall behold your face in righteousness. What does seeing God's face mean here, especially in this courtroom context?
In that ancient context, to behold God's face meant to enter his immediate, unclouded favor and presence. It's the final, personal, relational vindication.
So after standing under the judge's scrutiny,
he's saying he will stand before that divine judge not as a criminal, but as one who is accepted. He's saying, I won't be consumed by your gaze, I will be welcomed by it.
So the core satisfaction isn't in any material rewards he might get.
Not at all. It's entirely in the giver. It's standing before the only eyes that matter and seeing those eyes look on you with grace.
The satisfaction is relational, which leads to the second dimension, an eternal timing. This is in that simple phrase, when I awake.
Such a revolutionary phrase.
How does that phrase, when I awake, set his hope apart from the men of the world whose portion ends at the grave?
It creates what we'd call the long view. Now, on one level, it could mean waking up from a season of suffering, like waking from a bad dream.
But there's more to it.
Oh, yes. The weight of the contrast with the mortal fate of the wicked means many interpreters hear in this a clear whisper of resurrection hope, the awakening from the sleep of death.
It confirms the believer's portion can't be taken away by mortality.
Right. Death is just the long night before the final dawn.
So David is cultivating this long view. He can endure suffering now because he knows his ultimate contentment is secure in a future reality.
It gives incredible spiritual resilience. And that awakening leads right to the third dimension, a transformational outcome. He says he will be satisfied with your likeness.
Explain that. Why is being made like God the definition of satisfaction?
The sources all stress this point. To see God truly is not to remain unchanged. When we see the divine light, we are changed by it. The ultimate portion isn't a place like heaven or a condition, like relief from pain.
It's a personal transformation.
It's being conformed to God's presence and glory, reflecting his image. We're satisfied not when we have more, but when we are more like the one who gives us everything.
That's so countercultural. It says human fulfillment is found not in self-expression, but in reflecting a perfect external reality.
It's the total reversal of human pride, and the mirror analogy is helpful here. Imagine a silver mirror surrounded by gold and jewels. That's the wicked, content with the clutter of their temporary gifts. But David is like a mirror that knows its only purpose is to reflect light. And that mirror is only truly satisfied when the sun rises, the awakening, and it is filled completely with the reflection of that light, the likeness of God's glory. The mirror is just waiting for the dawn.
He will be satisfied when he awakes,
Yep.
and because he sees God and is made like him, it's a complete eternal contentment.
And that final outcome confirms the integrity he claimed at the start. His desire to be cleared wasn't selfish. It was a desire to be proven righteous so he could stand safely in the presence of a holy God.
This vision is so compelling, but as we move toward application, our sources keep drawing us away from David, the partial type, to Jesus Christ, the perfect fulfillment. Why do we have to make that shift?
Because while David's claim to covenantal integrity is genuine in this conflict, he can't claim it in an absolute sense.
He's still a sinner.
He still has to confess sin elsewhere. He relies on God's mercy. When he prays, "Search me, O God," he knows he's imperfect.
So who is the one person who embodies this psalm without any qualification, whose claim to integrity could stand up to God's inspection in every possible way?
Jesus Christ. He alone is the true, perfect, righteous sufferer. He alone could go to the Father and claim a heart that was wholly pure and steps that never left the path of divine righteousness.
So Jesus takes the psalm from a typological hope to a fulfilled reality.
He does. He's the one who faced enemies who hunted him like a lion, and he maintained absolute purity of heart through it all.
And this connects the courtroom language of the psalm right into the Gospels. Jesus was the one human whose cause was entirely just, but he was condemned by corrupt earthly courts.
A perfect fulfillment. And that courtroom scene of Psalm 17 plays out at the cross. On the cross, the men of the world, the Romans, the Sanhedrin, they appeared to win.
They got rid of the righteous sufferer.
And Jesus entrusted himself completely to the one who judges justly. But the climax of the psalm, that awakening that brings satisfaction, that's found in Christ's resurrection.
The resurrection wasn't just a miracle then. It was a cosmic legal declaration.
It was God's thunderous response to the prayer of the perfect sufferer. The resurrection publicly and definitively cleared Christ's name. It overturned the earthly verdict. It installed him as the one who now beholds the Father's face in resurrected glory. The resurrection is the full satisfaction of Psalm 17.5. Christ awoke, saw the Father's face, and was satisfied.
So this is the pivot for the Christian today. If we're still sinners, how can we possibly pray this psalm? We can't base it on our own performance.
We can't. We can only pray it through our union with Christ.
Imputed righteousness.
That's the doctrine applied to the prayer life. We confess our sin, but we also rejoice that God takes the perfect righteousness of the true David, Jesus, and he counts it legally as ours. So when we stand before the divine judge, we are standing hidden in the righteous one.
Our confidence that God will answer our plea, that we will see his face, isn't based on how well we walked the path yesterday.
No, it's based on the fact that we are clothed in the perfect obedience of Christ.
It's a borrowed integrity.
It is. Think of the psalm as a complex piece of music. David could play it, but only partially, with lots of drop notes.
Okay.
Jesus is the master virtuoso who played it flawlessly. And because we're united to him, his perfect performance is credited to us. And we get to share in the standing ovation, the eternal vindication that follows.
So let's shift now to practical application. If our hope is anchored in Christ's righteousness and this vision of his face, how should that reorder our lives right now?
Well, it has to change our definition of success. It forces us to reject the chase for that temporary portion in this life.
The psalm becomes a critique of our modern assumptions.
A constant critique of the idea that financial health or social status are the main signs of God's favor. If we really get verse 15, we have to fight that subtle, corrosive envy of those who seem to have it all in this life.
It also challenges our focus on reputation and being seen.
Absolutely. We have to prioritize living under God's view, being visited by night by his scrutiny, rather than seeking a public image or the admiration of men. In an age obsessed with visibility, David focuses on the evaluation that happens when no one else is watching.
If the real courtroom is before God's face, then his are the only eyes that matter.
Right. And finally, that hope that when I awake, it has to create a patient endurance in us.
It helps us cultivate the long view.
We have to learn to hold earthly goods loosely, to endure suffering and slander without demanding that God fix it right now in this life. We can do that because our real ultimate satisfaction is secured in a future resurrection.
Our final portion can't be contained by this age.
No. And that brings us to the final analogy from the sources, the one about the hotel traveler.
I like this one.
It captures the tension perfectly. The Christian must be the second traveler in the hotel. The first traveler arrives and immediately spends all their energy decorating the temporary room.
Hoarding the amenities, trying to buy the furniture.
Forgetting their stay ends in the morning. That's the wicked, seeking their portion in this life, mistaking temporary comfort for reality.
But the second traveler understands their status.
They enjoy the accommodation. They're thankful for the gifts, the bed, the food, but they keep their spiritual bags packed, their possessions light, and their heart fixed on the permanent reunion waiting for them at their final destination.
Psalm 17 calls us to be that second traveler.
To treat the world's gifts as temporary provisions, while finding our true satisfaction in the homecoming of seeing God's face.
That contrast is so necessary. David's vision of eternal personal joy versus the wicked's limitation to temporary comfort. The psalm puts the question to all of us. What are you truly satisfied with? What is your final portion?
And if our true portion is to be satisfied with your likeness, then the most pressing, provocative question for us today is not what earthly blessing we're looking for,
But what?
but how closely we desire to reflect the character of the judge right now in our humility and our restraint and our love for justice before we behold his face. That reflection should be the goal of every day we spend waiting to awaken.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thank
Yeah.
you for guiding us through this deep dive into Psalm 17.
It was my pleasure.
We hope this has equipped you with a clearer understanding of the righteous sufferer's true hope and the eternal portion secured in Christ. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.